Okay, so we're wrapping this up. We're doing really good, guys. So the one of the key things. This is a movie about sex. One of the things Stella says about Jeffrey's camera um, is that she says it's a portable keyhole. And she's joking, but what she means is that the keyhole is like a person, because the keys used to be a lot bigger, and you could actually put your eye up to the key and see through the door a little bit. Looking through a keyhole is sort of slang for watching people have sex, or watching a woman get undressed or something. Um, so she says his camera is like a portable keyhole because it allows him to zoom into other people's lives. And again, it's like there's a sexual reference there too. Um, the idea of the voyeur who's into sex. Now, obviously, on the surface, it does not appear to be sexually motivated. Um, Jeff is murder. He's investigating. He's looking at his neighbors. He does make a couple of kind of comments about Miss Torso and how how sexy she is or whatever. And the detective mentions that also. So there's some aspect of like, look how hot this woman is. Um, but this is actually a movie that's very much about sex. It's something that's often missed in the movie because a lot of people summary often causes you to lose details, and when you lose details, you make mistakes and you miss what the movie's about. So a lot of people will say, "Oh, Rear Window is about a guy who has a broken leg." Well, no, he doesn't. Jeffries does not have a broken leg. I mean, he does, I think, but it's bigger than that. He has a broken leg. His pelvis is also broken. The cast is not just on his leg. You see it when she's giving him a massage. The cast is over his pelvis. Um, it's big. It goes around his whole. It goes around his waist. It's pretty big. He's shattered not just his leg but his pelvis. Why does that matter? He cannot have sex. Um, he's incapable of sex at this point. Um, and that's a crucial thing because the other thing this movie is about is his relationship with Grace Kelly. He's starting to fall apart. Why? Well, I think it's implied that they haven't had sex in 8 weeks because he's been, in 7 weeks, I guess, but in a cast. He's dealing with a serious injury, and so their sex life is not happening. And so they sit around and they bicker about their relationship and where is this going, and are we getting married, and what kind of life do we want to have? Because something's gone wrong in the relationship and it's sex. And I mentioned that the neighbors are all mirrors of Jeff, but please notice that the joke with the newlywed neighbors is that they're having a lot of sex because they just got married, um, but that he is incapable of satisfying her. You see him go to the window and he's like, and she calls his name and he has to go back and like they seem to always be having sex and it's too much for him. This is a mirror of his relationship with Grace Kelly, where he cannot sexually satisfy her because of his injury, and it's implied in the movie. They don't sort of come out and say it. Um, there's also another sort of key, and I'm going to say something ridiculous, and you're all going to make fun of me, but like he switches from binoculars to a telephoto lens, and the telephoto lens is on his lap. And when he first gets it, he puts it on his lap and wheels over to the thing. So I'm going to say something ridiculous, and we're all going to forget that I said it and just move on with our lives. But the telephoto lens is a kind of replacement penis. His dick isn't working, and the telephoto lens is a replacement for that. If he can't have sex, he's going to spy on people and find out about their lives and get involved in a murder mystery, etc. Because sexual adventures are off for him right now. And we'll just forget that I said that, but I really do think it's in there, but I don't want to overdo it. Then you get that thing where students make fun of teachers for like, oh, every teacher thinks, my teacher said that the telephoto lens is a symbol for a penis. And like, it's not really what I meant. But in this movie, it does remind you of his broken penis that he changes to some, he gets the replacement for his sex life is the long thin thing on his lap is the telephoto lens. Okay, so let's take a look at other stuff. Um, there are also quite a few references in this movie, and you might have missed them. They're pretty. Oh, one of the first things he looks at, by the way, is women sunbathing topless. They're up on the roof. There's a helicopter up there, and they're up on the roof. Um, so good. Okay. One of the first lines of the first thing you hear in the movie, the very first thing that you hear. Always pay attention to the first thing you see and the first thing you hear in any movie, and the last thing you hear and the last thing you see in any movie, because it'll tell you a lot about what the movie's going to be about and what it's been about. Sort of like your essays. The introduction will tell you what you're going to do, and the conclusion tells you what you've done. So one of the things that's interesting in this movie is that the first line of dialogue is a radio ad saying, "Oh, hey, men, are you feeling run down? Are you feeling tired? Is your masculinity sort of falling low?" it seems like just a random radio ad, but when you realize that Jeff has a broken pelvis and he can't have adventures, but he also can't have sex, his sort of masculinity is in question here. And you probably missed it because they don't want to come right out and say it. It's an easy thing to miss in an old movie, but more than one character is worried that Jeffries is gay. It happens quick, and you don't necessarily notice it. But when Stella at the beginning is giving him a massage, and she's bugging him about how come you don't want to get married, because she wants to. Why don't you want to get married? She's such a beautiful girl. She's a perfect girl. How come you don't want to marry her? And she gives him, and they discuss it a little bit. She mentions he may have a hormone deficiency because his temperature isn't rising when he looks at his torso. There's a suggestion like, "Are you even into girls?" And then she says again, because she's sort of surprised about him not wanting to get married. He says, "Lisa's so perfect. She's everything except for what I want. She's perfect. She's everything except for what I want." And what he means is he wants an adventure girl. But Stella says, she says to him, "Is what you want something you can discuss?" That's interesting because, of course, the thing that she's worried the thing he can't discuss in 1954 is being gay. That maybe she can't say it out loud. He can't say it out loud, and maybe that's his problem. So it's a kind of interesting detail, and it's not the only time it comes up. When he's with Grace Kelly, he's sort of talking about. Actually, let me see if I can find I'm looking through my notes here. When he's with Grace Kelly, he's and they're discussing the relationship. Let me I gotta back up and find it. He's looking at the relationship, and the relationship's going to collapse. They're having this big problem, and she says this demonstrates the problem, and Lisa says maybe the problem is something too frightful to utter, and it's a little ambiguous. He's sort of talking about the murder, in which case the problem too frightful to utter would be the murder. But I think in the context of their relationship, the problem that might be too frightful to utter, the thing you can't say out loud, is she's wondering if the reason he doesn't want to marry her is because he's gay. So it's hinted at by several different characters, but it really indicates the sort of sexual nature of what's going on in the movie. I'm going to say something else crazy because I'm not done saying crazy shit. It's worth thinking about a person, just really quick. Imagine a person who is so obsessed with hardcore pornography on the internet that they have trouble maintaining real romantic relationships in the real world. Now, obviously, this movie is not about that, but it's a little about that. The fantasy life that people have access to on the internet with internet pornography is not dissimilar to Jeff, Jeff is more interested in the voyeurism of looking into other people's windows than he is in the beautiful woman in his own apartment. Just like there are lots of people who are more interested in sort of internet pornography than they are in real relationships or video games or whatever, right? They're distracted by this sort of fantasy world. And the thing about the fantasy world is it's always interesting. It's just for you. There's all these variety of Grace Kelly's only one person, but look at all the windows I could be looking into. It's very similar to I could be in a relationship with one person, or I can look at thousands of different pornographic movies starring different people. His fantasy life, the voyeur life of looking through the windows, has started to replace or damage his relationships in the real world because they become more important to him than the sort of the real world. Good. Okay. This is why the end of the movie is so interesting, because this is the fucked up thing about the movie. Grace Kelly and Jimmy Stewart are having massive relationship problems of a sexual nature because they can't have sex and because she's worried he might be gay and he doesn't want to get married. And what does that mean for their future? What's interesting is the murder across the courtyard fixes their relationship. They're about to break up at the end of Act 1, but by Act 2, they have something to do together that isn't sex. It's solving a murder together, and that fantasy screen unites them. They're united in the same fantasy, they become interested in the same thing. And it saves their relationship temporarily. But we'll talk about that in the next video.